Please be seated. There's a story that it's a well-known story of a candidate to become a monk. So he applies for the monastery, and he is told that in this monastery they are very strict, and they can only speak 2 words every 10 years. So after 10 years, they open the door. The candidate to become a monk comes out and says, "Food, ugly." Goes back. 10 years later, comes back. And they say, okay, 2 words. He says, "Water, cold." Okay. 10 years later, he comes back and says 2 words and says, "Mattress, hard." So the director of the monastery says, "You're fired." "Why?" says the monk. "You've been here 30 years and always complaining." So Isaac spoke very little. In all the Torah, we found Isaac starting a conversation only twice in his life. He answered when others talked to him, but he had very few initiative to speak. Only twice he started the conversation. And one time happens in our Parsha. So please remember that for later. So I invite you to analyze once again one of the most known parts of the Torah. It's the chapter 22, is the Akedah. And this chapter involves 4 people. According to the Midrash, these 4 people are Abraham, Yitzchak, and the 2 servants or the 2 helpers were Ishmael and Eliezer. Okay? Ishmael was Abraham's son with Hagar, and Eliezer was his servant for many years. So Abraham takes with him 2 Ne'arim, 2 helpers, and what all these 4 people have in common? Abraham, Yitzchak, Ishmael, and Eliezer. Anybody would like to guess? They are all part of a covenant. They are the only 4 people who were circumcised at this time. Abraham, Yitzchak, Ishmael, and Eliezer. So for Abraham, it's not very clear who is the heir, who is going to inherit him. Even though God told him several times, Abraham has doubts. And I don't blame Abraham, because we all have doubts. And we see the doubts at the beginning of the chapter. There's a dialogue. God says to Abraham, "Kach na et bincha, et yechidcha, asher ahavta," take your son. So Abraham says, "I have 2 sons. Et yechidcha, the only one. They are both only to their mother. Asher ahavta, the one you love. I love both of them. Et Yitzchak, take Isaac." And if you see, and lech lecha el eretz Hamoria, you go to the Mount of Moriah, and you will sacrifice him. There's no answer to that request of God. Then, in the story, they walked for 3 days. Abraham still had doubts. And the verse says, "Vayar et hamakom merachok." He sees the place from a distance. But also the word makom is another name for God. So he tells his youth, "Sit here," as we said, "and me and the youth, ani ve'anar," not my son, ani ve'anar, me and this guy, Isaac, we're going to go there and we'll get back. And then in verse number 7, Isaac speaks. He says, "Father," and he says, "Yes, son," says Abraham. Now he is the son. So he says, "Where is the lamb?" And Abraham answer, "God will choose one, son." And they went together. So I want to stop here with the analysis for a second. And what does Abraham do before they go together, before taking his son? I said, "Vayar et hamakom merachok." He saw the place, he saw God from a distance, merachok. And I think Abraham is teaching us to look at things in perspective, to see the picture from a distance, to observe life not with a magnifier glass, trying to find the faults and imperfections Rather, take off your glasses and see your life in perspective. See how far you've gotten. See how many blessings you have. Yes, Abraham had doubts, unsolved questions, and Abraham looked at them from a distance. When I go to the Museum of Art and spend some time in front of the Japanese footbridge of Claude Monet, I don't look at it very close to see where the paint is cracking or where the frame is peeling. I rather observe it from a distance and just enjoy it. So the first person in the Torah to be called the prophet, a Nabi, the first person who prayed, Itpalel Abraham, it says, had doubts as we all have. And Abraham Avinu, our forefather, had to take a step back to understand that it's the best way to appreciate et amakom, the place, or if you prefer, to appreciate God's blessings, to taking a step back. So I want you to zoom out and learn one more thing about Isaac. I said Isaac spoke very little. How many times did he speak? 2, yes? One is when he speaks with his father, and we just learn about it. But the second is when he blesses his children. The Parsha probably is teaching us one of the most important lessons. Zoom out and speak to the previous generation and with the next generation as well. Zoom out and talk to them. So let me finish this with one of my favorite stories. Back in the 30s, the Labour Party in Israel was struggling over the question of whether to be in favor of partitioning the land of Israel or not. If there was a partition, there would be a Jewish state. But on the other hand, if there were no partition, they would have to give up. If there were partition, there would be a Jewish state. But on the other hand, if that happened, they will have to give up some of the most precious and sacred parts of the land of Israel. And so many people in the Labour Party were torn. Should they be in favor of partition because it might lead to peace and because it would enable them to rescue many Jews from Europe? Or should they be against partition because it meant giving up part of the land forever? So Ben-Gurion himself was divided on this question. And so he went to Yosef Tabenkin, who was one of the elder statesmen of the Labour Party and who had always been his mentor. And he asked him how should he vote. Tabenkin said to Ben-Gurion, "Give me 24 hours and I will tell you what I think you should do. Because before I give you my advice, I need to consult with 2 people." Tabenkin came back the next day and said, "I think you should vote in favor of partition." Ben-Gurion thanked him for his advice, and then he said, "Would you mind telling me who were the 2 people whom you had to consult with before you made your decision?" Tabenkin said, "Yes, I asked my grandfather, who is no longer alive, and I asked my grandchild, who is not yet born. And only after I thought about what they could say and about what be their best in their eyes, could I make a decision." So I would respectfully suggest that this is what we all ought to do when we are faced with serious questions, wherever they are. Zoom out and look at the distance, look at the great and the bigger picture. Take a step back and see the whole picture and look for the presence of God. It is out there. Shabbat Shalom. Let's rise, please, for Hatzi Kaddish, page